and strategies with our friends at Accenture. So before we get started, I wanted to just cover a few housekeeping items. First, the most common question that we get is this webinar being recorded? And the answer is yes, it will be recorded. It'll be available to watch immediately afterwards on our YouTube channel, where we are also live streaming right now. Additionally, if you registered for this webinar via Zoom, you will receive an on-demand link a few days after the webinar as well. We will also be doing a live Q&A at the end of this event. So if you're joining via Zoom, feel free to drop your questions in that Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window whenever you have them, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Don Jones to introduce our guests.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Don Jones. I'm head of developer skills here at Pluralsight, and I'm joined today by two folks from Accenture, Michelle Buechler and Kathy Chen. Michelle, why don't you just kind of quickly tell us what you do there?
Hi, Don. Thanks for having us. I am a learning lead, a global learning lead at Accenture, and my primary focus is on technology breadth of skills and also on strategic priorities in the learning space aligned to our strategic business growth agenda.
Okay, awesome. Welcome. Kathy, how about you?
Hi there, I'm Kathy Chen, and I am the Global Cloud Learning Lead at Accenture.
All right, that's pretty important stuff these days. So I want to kind of, before we really dig into the meat of this, I want to kind of talk about this phrase, technology skill development. I'm sure there's folks who are going to listen to this and say, yeah, you know what, we've got a great technology skill development program. We let people pick 1 or 2 classes a year and off they go. But this isn't like, you're not pitching technology skill development as just a fancy new way of saying training, right? Michelle, what does it kind of mean to you?
So for us and for me, I think broadly at Accenture, we look at technology skill development in 2 veins. One is the breadth and one is the depth, right? As we look at where we are right now in the world, right? We're entering into this 4th industrial revolution. We have 2 truths that we like to say here at Accenture. One is every company is a technology company, whether you truly are technology at the core or not, you need to be a technology company, right? Given where we are in the industry. And the pace of technology is changing exponentially, that it's continuously reshaping entire industries and human experiences. And because of those 2 truths, every business needs to really focus on technology skill development. And at Accenture, we look at that broadly, right? We believe that everybody at Accenture needs to have some breadth of technology skills, especially around the technologies that are changing and shaping our daily lives today, that you and I touch every day, like cloud, like artificial intelligence, right? And then there is a certain core of people who absolutely need to go very, very deep. And I think that's why Kathy and I make a good mix, right? Because I kind of cover the breadth, and then Kathy's role is covering the portion of our population that needs to go deep. So our technology skills development strategy incorporates that both, right? Both technology skills from a breadth and a depth perspective. That's what it means to me.
So Kathy, why is this important? Like, why is the company chosen to invest the time and the money and the people and the resources? How does this really play out into the company's strategy?
Well, I think overall, we're very fortunate that our CEO, Julie Sweet, is a huge proponent of learning overall. She's a continuous learner. And one of the first things that she did when she took the helm a 1.5 years ago was to send a note out to everybody at Accenture, all 450,000 employees at the time. Now we're 540,000. 540,000, that's crazy to say to all of our employees, here's a learning board of what I'm learning. And so she set the tone from the top that learning overall is important. Add that to the context that Michelle just described about technology is fueling a lot of our business. At the core of what happens, technology enables a lot of other things to happen, like business transformation and innovation. And so we see that in the marketplace as we work with our clients. And so because our clients are doing a lot of transformation through technology. That is why we feel that it's really important that our people have the important tech skills so that we can help our clients transform. So it's really driven by what our clients are seeing kind of overall as we look across the landscape in the market of what's happening across all companies, that we need that depth of skill. No longer can you say, I'm a marketing person, I don't need to know about this. I'm a psychology whatever, or an org psych person, I don't need to know about that. You need to know a little bit, or as Michelle talked about, the breadth, but certainly for technology professionals, they need that depth of skill. And because technology changes so fast, it's never a one and done learning cycle. It's a continuous learning cycle. And so that curiosity and fueling that and keeping content up to date and keeping our people engaged to see learning as an evolving thing over time, that's really our mission as learning professionals, but certainly the culture we're setting within Accenture as well.
So Michelle, let's dig into your side of things a little bit. You are leading up Accenture's data literacy initiative. Obviously, that's a problem that a lot of companies are dealing with. Can you tell us about what that initiative is and what you're actually solving for?
Sure. So building off of what Kathy was just saying, we at Accenture, our skills, our talent skills or technology skills strategy is a part of our overall business strategy, right? It's built right in, right? So we don't have a different, digital strategy or a different, technology strategy or a different, skills strategy. It is all baked into the core of our business strategy. So because of that, and because of the truths that I talked about earlier, right? Every company is a technology company, and the pace of change is happening so fast in technology. It is paramount for us all to know, as Kathy said, even just a little bit about these technologies and how they're affecting our lives as technologists ourselves. Everybody uses technology on a day-to-day basis, right? As a consumer, and everybody uses it as a worker, and everybody uses it, every business uses it every day. So the program that I'm leading is our digital literacy program. We call it Technology Quotient. The concept really follows, it has the same principles of IQ and EQ, right? Everybody has an intelligent quotient, everybody has an emotional quotient. We believe the same thing. Everybody has a technology quotient, meaning you need to know, or you have some understanding of technologies as it applies in the world today. So the program that we're leading in collaboration with Pluralsight is just pushing out what the biggest technologies are that are paramount and changing our lives on a day-to-day basis, and pushing it out to all 550,000 people that we have at Accenture, and asking them to get even just this much, right, conversant about all of these technologies. We've got a platform of about 11 or 10 or 11 technologies that we really want everybody to know about. And we're pushing that out to all of our people, no matter what your role is, right? No matter how senior you are, no matter how junior you are, no matter, if your job is an executive assistant or a facilities workplace manager or finance or a deep technologist, right? There is a baseline, a core of digital literacy that Accenture, starting from the top with Julie, expects you to know about. And that's essentially what the program is, this TQ program that we're running.
So if every company is a technology company, then you're kind of saying every company also needs to be a learning company at the same time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's tackle the depth side. Kathy, you're leading Accenture's Cloud Native College, and I gather that's a much more technical audience that needs more than just a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. We have a lot of different curricula. We have a big cloud learning portfolio, and cloud native is one area which we are seeing more and more uptake. It really focuses on creating that full stack engineer. So it's everything from the front end of application to the back end of the database. And so within our Cloud Native College, there are kind of 5 areas that we focus in. So 5 tracks you could take, or you could take all of them. So everything from application engineering, which is really like, full front end development, to programming languages like React and so on. And it goes to platform engineering. So how do you do DevSecOps in the back end? And then architecture. So we talk about cloud native architecture. So it really spans sort of the framing of what a full stack engineer might need to do from beginning to end. And so we have a lot of different courses that we've curated from Pluralsight put into the channels so that people can learn and grow through these different areas. And we put a nice wrapper around the Cloud Native College, so it's not just self-study. We actually offer office hours. We have SMEs who come and do sessions with our people as well. So kind of that combination of digital learning plus high-touch learning enables our people to develop those deep skills. Because as you may know, technical skills is not just head knowledge. You actually have to do it to make sure you know how to do it. You have to have a hands-on portion.
That is a great story. Sounds like something I'd actually be interested in doing too. All right. So look, I want to kind of draw back a little bit. And the idea here is not necessarily just to brag about the great work you guys are doing at Accenture, but to let other organizations know that they can follow some of these same patterns and achieve some of the same results, whether it's just helping people learn a little bit about some key things or helping technologists dive really, really deep into areas. So I unfortunately, Zoom's giving me some screen share issues today, so I don't have access to this graphic to share with folks, but we'll make sure it gets distributed later on for anyone who's interested. You guys have kind of identified a 10-step process, and there's a few of these I want to hit on, but I'm going to kind of walk through it real quick. So the first one, and this is one where I'd love both of you to jump in, because this honestly sounds like the key to making this work, is identify the business goals. Like how, especially, I mean, you've got 500,000 employees. How do you define the goals, whether you're doing something that's just going to be an inch deep for a lot of people, or you're doing something that's going to be a mile deep for a smaller group? What's your process?
So I mean, our process is aligning with the business strategy and the business leaders, right? So taking a look at where the market is going, taking a look at the trends, right? And figuring out where our business priorities are, and then identifying how learning and skilling of our talent can help get us to those priorities. So we do a monumental task internally of tracking our skills that our people have internally, and so we do have quite a bit of gap analysis that we do. Right, here's the skill of our people. Here's the volumes of people that have XYZ skill. And here's the skill that we predict that we need according to our business leaders and our business strategy and the forecast and looking at the market. How do we get from X to Y? So that's essentially what we do. We work very closely with the business. To help drive and identify what those goals are. So that's my answer, Kathy. I'll see if you have anything to add to that.
I would say, building on what you say, I mean, the way we always talk about it is business strategy, talent strategy, learning strategy. And so the three hang together. And so we always start with the business strategy. So in my case, in cloud, we actually started this Cloud Native College 2 years ago. And that was pre-pandemic. And so we had already seen that the cloud was starting to form and become big. Well, after the pandemic hit, it really accelerated a lot of the digital transformation of our clients. And so cloud became even more important because everything was on the cloud. We're all using it. And so we formed an official organization in September called Cloud First. And we're investing a lot of money in that organization. And so cloud learning became even more important at that point. And so 2 years ago, we had already identified the need to develop these software engineers to become full stack engineers, to string everything together for our clients. And then once the pandemic hit, we just accelerated everything. What we had anticipated to be a 3 to 5 year time window is now 18 months, right? Where everything just moving a lot faster. And so again, it's tying to the market that we had always had these building blocks in place, but now we have to do it faster and more at scale because we're getting more and more demand. A lot of our revenue is being driven by our cloud business. And as a result, we need people who can do the work. And so it's really that, as the business has moved faster, the cloud learning, our team has been running as fast as we can to make sure that we can leverage, existing things like what Pluralsight has. We're building things as well. And it's really about meeting that demand to help our clients achieve their goals.
So step one is identify business goals. Step two in your process is map those goals to your tech needs. Michelle, you kind of hinted at step three, and I want to talk about this because I know it's a sticking point. Assess team and skill levels. Like physically, especially, my gosh, with 500,000 people, how do you do it? I know a lot of companies really center on certifications for technology roles, at least a lot of them. But what other tools do you use to find out where you're at?
So Accenture, and this is not lost on me, our our breadth of people, right? Our volume of people, our scale allows us to do some things that I am cognizant that other companies just cannot do. Okay, so I'm going to preface my answer with that. One of the things that we have done is we actually did create our own proprietary algorithm on how we look and look at people's skills, right? And it's a combination of things like your experience, right? That we are tracking, right? So if Kathy's on a project, I know that she's, her role on this project is XYZ, and these are the skills that are associated with that role, right? So your data has to be there first and foremost, and that's a huge problem for a lot of organizations. And we had to do a lot of data cleanup as well to get ourselves in this place. So how often Kathy is using that skill, how frequently Kathy is using that skill, right? So we developed this algorithm. Prior to this algorithm, it was self-assess, right? It was, Kathy, tell me what skills you have, right? And that, I know a lot of organizations are at that point. So this has been a complete journey for us. So we do have this algorithm, but the good news is that there are plenty of companies out there. And I know Pluralsight can help with this as well, right? But through your skills IQ and the skills assessments, right? There are plenty of companies out there that can help do that analysis for companies if they're having trouble doing that. So that's the first and foremost thing, is just kind of getting an inventory on the skills of your people to know what skills they have and what skills they don't have. And then really the relationship between those skills to see, like Kathy said, right? In her example of cloud, right? We're taking, cloud engineers and we're making them full stack engineers, right? I mean, so we can figure out then the relationship of those skills and which people and roles we can upskill to other areas to help fill some of those gaps.
And Kathy, how do you kind of approach that skill assessment at that deeper level?
Yeah, it's interesting because we have a whole team within Accenture called our certification team, where we track external certs like with Microsoft or Amazon or Google, the big hyperscalers. But they also help us create internal certification programs whereby we assess our own people. So for example, using this cloud native college, which is again one of many programs we have, after they finish the learning path and do the skills IQ assessments in Pluralsight, we actually get them accredited within Accenture, where they then are interviewed by a SME. They're different levels, right? There's associate, practitioner, and master. And so depending on what proficiency level we're going for, we'll give them sort of different internal assessments. So it could be, to show you did this on a job at the first level. The next is you have to talk to us me and show what you know. And the third is actually you have to code something and create something to show us you're a master. And so we have these internal checkpoints where we really see what level of proficiency people are. And then, like Michelle said, the algorithms helps us identify people and helps them kind of log their skills, because there's again, it's a combination of experience plus any certifications you may have, and then you can put an aspirational specialization as well. And so there's a number of ways we assess people, but some of those things of, I would say the challenges we give them to actually show what they know, and then talking to an expert, doing those interviews at the master level. We don't do that for everybody. It's just too labor intensive, right? So there are different ways that we look at how people are exhibiting their skills, but on the job experience is ultimately what matters for us. And so that's why at the broadest level, that's what we use as a proxy for, how to do it. That's how we assess them. If you can deliver for a client something, you probably know how to do it.
You can do it. I got to tell you, I love the idea of internal certifications. I know there are a lot of work to put together, and I don't want to beat up on the vendor certifications, but when you make your own, you can reflect your own values, what matters to your company. It's so specific. It can capture your own institutional knowledge and everything else. It's great to see companies that do that. So that kind of takes us to step 4, which is identify the skills and then create your technology skills development teams. And I want to emphasize that those first 4 steps, so business goals, map the goals, assess the team, identify the skills they need, you do those on a quarterly basis. That's something that regularly occurs, which I love, because it means you're kind of constantly ready to adjust to shifts in the business strategy, if that's where it's all starting. So then we get into 4 steps that are a weekly cadence. And the first of those, I really want to hear your thoughts on. It's design your skill roadmaps and assign members. And I guess, first of all, I want to hear about your design process, because that's what I do for a living at Pluralsight is design these skill roadmaps. So I love to talk about it, but weekly, really.
So a lot of this kind of revolves around, for our learning organization, being agile, right? So we have definitely taken the traditionally, software development process of agile, and we have applied it to learning, right? In the same way that software developers develop a software application product, we are developing a learning product. So a lot of those same principles apply, and we do that now in mass across all the learning that we do at Accenture. And that's really kind of transformed the way that we're able to work with the business, work with our learners to bring a better product to life, right? So we have all the same concepts. We have the co-creation, the ideation, right, with learners, with leaders. We have the MVPs, right? We test learning products early and often, and we go through, Scrum meetings, right? We've got we've got all of that, all of these terms that are familiar to you as software developers. We do that in learning, and that's how we roll this out. And we are continuing to do this on a weekly basis because we use that agile methodology as we push our learning out, all of our learning.
I will say also, to add to that is, how do we constantly adjust our skill roadmaps is in partnership with our SMEs and our sponsors. So the learning culture we talked about before really does permeate through people's behaviors and actions. And I should mention, as part of our learning culture, we have a huge kind of unspoken principle as part of our culture is leaders teaching leaders. So it's expected that if you know something, you share it, and you're either faculty or you help develop something. And so we're fortunate to be able to work with some wonderful people who are experts in their fields, world class, who help us shape the learning agenda. And so when we call them up, they will give us their time to help us define what are those skills. It changes so quickly, especially in the technology space. And so what are those skills that are hot in the market right now? Where do we need to adjust as we go? And then how do we adjust the content? So it's everything from, oh, did you hear that Microsoft is doing a new release of this? So therefore we need to make sure they have that, to, you know what, as we look forward, we're hearing about this little tiny skill called Snowflake. What in the world is Snowflake, and how do we upskill somebody in that? And then of course everybody knows about them because of their big IPO, right? And so it's constantly adjusting the big areas we know, and even the coming and forming emerging skills as well.
And I want to just add, sorry, Dawn, I just want to add one more thing. Like what Kathy and I are saying is, you're hearing a lot of words like business and sponsors, right? What you're not hearing is just HR leaders, right? Any program and project we create has to be done in tandem, in close collaboration with learners and the business. Because if we are pushing out learning programs and it is just seen as an HR initiative, it never works. It never works. So I just want to make sure we're saying the business and the sponsors and the subject matter experts, but and HR certainly has to be there and support 100%. But the drive is from the business, and that's who we are partnering closely with, and that makes a big difference.
So you've designed the skills. Now it's time to actually teach the skills. So this is where the rubber meets the road. And I want to drag a question from the audience. They said, for developers, we've found that instructor-led training is much more effective than asking them to learn a topic on their own. Do you have an opinion? Do you prescribe anything as you're designing your programs? Do you have any data one way or the other?
Well, it's fascinating you ask. Yeah, it's fascinating you ask, because we've been thinking about this a lot since we've all had to go virtual, right? A year and a half ago, we had to translate everything into a virtual format. And we had a lot of courses already offered. I mean, at Accenture, we offer like 10,000 different courses. And so translating virtual is more about lifting the principles and fitting it for the course. So we were fortunate that most of the courses we had running, we were able to translate virtual. Now we're wrestling with the question, just like everyone else is, what's appropriate for in-person, what's appropriate for virtual, right? As we move into this new world, hybrid or whatever you want to call it. And so with technical learning, you do, as I said earlier, you do need that hands-on experience. You can't just watch a video and know how to code something. It's like saying, I'm going to watch a video on how to do eye surgery and I'll be able to do it when you ask me to. It just doesn't work that way. And so we try to provide a lot of environments, safe environments, right, that are unconnected to client work, sandboxes, if you will, which I know Pluralsight is rolling out. But we also create custom things within Accenture where people can play with the ideas. And so we try to do a variety of different modalities to, equip them. There's on the job learning, as I said. Then we have the video pass, we have self-learning, and we always try to put that in combination with something where they can get their hands, into the technology and play with it, and then also offer that SME or that faculty person to answer questions. Because sometimes as you're going through it and you're struggling with, I don't understand why this is not working, or I keep getting an error, you need to ask somebody a question, somebody who's gone before you, who can say, hey, have you thought about this? And so we do a combination of all those. It is self-study, it is office hours with SMEs, in some cases with certifications, which like a Google certification, as you may know, takes like 80 hours for some of them. And so through that journey, we offer touch points. You do your self-study, you do some practice exams. We have office hours every week. You can go along with a buddy. You can be part of a study group. So we offer all those different things to supplement, or I should say augment the digital learning.
Excellent, thank you. So the last two steps here in this weekly cadence are to let folks apply those skills and then reassess, update the inventory so we know what progress we've made. Then we snake back into the quarterly cycle for a couple last bits. One of those is to review the progress. How are we doing toward our goals? And this is the big one I want to talk about, the last step, communicate outcomes. Seems like a lot of processes leave that out, but you guys very intentionally included it. So what does that mean to communicate outcomes of this whole kind of loop?
So for us, we are a very metrics-driven company, right? So we want to make sure, we said we were going to set out to do and accomplish XYZ, right? Did we actually accomplish that? And then use that, what did we learn? If we didn't quite hit the goals that we outlined in the beginning, does that mean it wasn't a success, right? So we have a lot of reflection around that. We communicate it back out to the business. We communicate it back out to our sponsors. We communicate it oftentimes out to our learners as well, right? We tend to have a very transparent conversation about, the success. If things are a success, we will run them again, right? We will, probably pump up the participation or the volume or the throughput, right? We're constantly changing. We never call something one and done, right? It is a constant evolution of getting better using the data that we've collected. So we do communicate that out. I thought you were going to ask me, the really difficult part has always been, the chicken and the egg with measuring your return on learning.
That's how it was. That was next.
which is a nut that is, it's difficult, right? It's difficult to measure because there are so many other factors that come into play aside from learning. So there are some things that we measure. We take some, educated guesses and assumptions, right? If we can we have been trying to tie, revenue and sales and things like that to appropriate programs as they match, right? The types of skills that we have for those things. But it's never as black and white as what it seems.
Yeah. And there's a good takeaway there, which I think is that it is difficult because business value is created by many, many things, not just by one thing, but that shouldn't stop you from trying. Right. And even if you can't fully measure it as much as you'd like to, that doesn't mean what you're doing has no value. Like, right. I think a lot of people will argue the opposite. And it's like, well, if I can't measure the value, then you can't tell me there is none either. Like, we're not measuring zero either. We're not measuring anything. So that's great. Kathy, any thoughts on communicating outcomes for you? Because especially in the engineering space, I've got kind of a specific question from the audience I want to hit you with, but I want to get your thoughts first.
Well, as Michelle said, we try to measure learning outcomes in different ways. One is, how fast can our people get staffed, right? Because ultimately they're working directly with their clients. And if our clients don't accept them on the job, it's a proxy for it. They don't have the skill, which therefore maybe the learning wasn't very effective. So we've done correlations between time, how long it takes people, and it's unique in our space because we do work with clients. It's that kind of model. And so how fast do you get staffed? How many times are you staffed repeatedly in this skill? So we look at those metrics as well as, and less so at least in my space, we're moving less away from, how many people went through the course or how many people are certified. Yes, we track certifications. It's important for our alliance partners, we're ecosystem partners with a lot of people. It's important for our own information, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it on the job. And so we're moving more towards looking at, can you apply it? Which is a harder thing to measure, which is why we don't have like the silver bullet on that, but we're looking at all the data we have and trying to string together and correlate, like if this, and this, we string it together. Could it tell us a picture of, yes, people got staffed and that they're working at clients faster with the skills they need when they need it. So,
yeah. So here's the question, and it's one that comes up a lot, particularly in form of learner motivation. Do you connect these these accomplishments to other areas like job roles, project assignments, promotions, compensation? Is that part of it?
Interesting you ask, particularly in the engineering spaces. I see that's specific to the question. We have a project team in place right now, particularly around infrastructure engineering, which is an area Accenture isn't traditionally known for. We're known for software engineering and lots of other things, end-to-end transformation. And so we have a special team devoted to looking at what's the value proposition for this and what fits into that is the skills, and how do your skills help your progression? Should we be giving hot skill bonuses? All of that fun stuff. And I think the jury's still out. In some cases, we do give hot skills bonuses when you have certain skills. We do look at skills, certainly in staffing, as we have a special system called My Scheduling where you can tag your skills so that when people are looking for you, if I want to staff somebody on my project, I see that Don has Microsoft and Google, and my client has both of them, I'm going to take Don on my project, right? So we do use that quite often. In fact, we say at Accenture, skills are the new currency. In other words, that is how you're known. That is your own brand. And so we're trying to elevate the point that skills development is important, and it will give you more opportunities to be staffed in a variety of things. So the more you keep your skills relevant, the more opportunities you'll have. And then we're trying to work it into the overall employee value proposition and career and compensation. Those pieces in different geographies and in different skills, there's sort of different ways of doing it in protocols. So.
And there is compensation that comes along with that, right? So if you are considered to have unique skills, right, you will get compensated for that, right? If I have a certain skill set that's unique, and also in demand that is different than what Don has, I may get compensated more. So we definitely look at that.
So Michelle, you're driving this TQ program, which is just hugely broad. Like the number of people you're trying to reach is insane to me. And how do you drive adoption? Like people are busy, especially in a consulting company, right? There's this idea that if you're not billable, then you're in trouble somehow, right? So is this a mandatory part of the job? Is it encouragement? Is there some other set of incentives that the company has set up to create engagement?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything, right? One of the things that we have this philosophy that we've started to kind of crystallize internally with our program actually is this concept of, we wanted our program, this TQ program that I'm running, to be a growth-driven learning program versus a compliance-driven learning program, right? And what are the mindsets, the behaviors, and the actions that happen if you have a growth-driven mindset program versus a compliance-driven program? We need both, right? There are certainly programs we need to make sure are required and mandatory, and everybody has checked the box, and that's important to keep us out of trouble in certain ways. There are certain things, certain programs, that will fit into the nice to have, right? And then you've got my program, which kind of sits somewhere in the middle, right? So it's a little bit of both. We are not calling our program mandatory, although that is a highly debatable topic internally, but we are not calling it mandatory. However, when you hear the CEO of your 550,000 company, employee company, say, you must do this. This is important. I am doing it. I want you to do it. It kind of incentivizes you a little bit, right? You're
Be a little
listening.
career limiting to not, yeah.
You're listening, right? And are we tracking and saying, okay, Don didn't do it, he's getting a tick? No, we're not, right, at that level, but it's known, right? So it's the tone from the top. It is, it's the leaders, role modeling the behavior. And it's also, I'm not going to lie, we didn't just roll this program out and say, okay, people are just going to take it because the content is great, right? Like we've partnered with Pluralsight, as and the content is great, but people aren't going to take it just because the content is great. We have to create a whole 360-degree surround sound, change program around this to make sure that the right messages are getting out. The what's in it for me, the, why should I do this? Why should I care? Just because Julie said so is not good enough reason for a lot of people. And it shouldn't be, right? But it does carry a lot of weight. So it's that, it's all of that coming together. It's the, we are busier now than ever before. We are in an unprecedented time, everybody going virtual, right? Helping everyone get to the cloud faster than ever before. It's making the space for people to learn, giving them the permission that it's okay to take a break for an hour and actually go learn, right? All of that needs to come together. And that's a lot of what our communications and our change plan is centered all around, is just getting the right messages out, also making it fun, right? Having a little bit of friendly competitions, but we are trying to stay away very much from the beat you over the head, you must get it done, because we don't want that mindset shift to happen. The minute you tell me I have to do it, I roll my eyes and I probably don't want to do it, right? The minute you say you get to do this, right? This is a privilege for you to do. It just has a little bit of a change to the psyche. So that's the approach we're taking with TQ, and we're learning. We're definitely learning as we go along.
I think it's important to recognize those psychological factors too. Programs can create a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. A lot of companies do weaponize them and don't necessarily realize that, like, these are human beings, not just numbers on a paper.
Yeah.
And you've got to acknowledge that. Yeah. So I want to pull back and kind of, Michelle, you spoke about this a little earlier. Wrapped around this whole 10-step process is the notion of agility. Why is that so important? Like, you've set up specific quarterly and weekly cadences, which, I mean, even in software development, those are short time frames, which means you really think you need to keep an eye on this and be ready to pivot. If both of you could kind of talk to me about the importance of agility in this process.
So I think it's important because you need to be able to keep up with the changes of the business and the changes of the learners and the patterns, right? I mean, are we changing our program on a weekly basis? No, right? But we are looking at, what are the trends over time, right? We're continually talking about it. Just because nothing is static, right? It's insane to think that I'm going to roll a program out and that's going to be as good as it is and we're done, right? We've done the job. So that's why agility is really important, because we need to make sure that we are keeping up with the business to just change, right? The business is changing. Like COVID is a perfect example, right? Who knew we were going to go through what we went through over the past year? Nobody, right? So if we hadn't been able to pivot and to rotate so quickly through being so agile, right, we would have been in a lot of trouble. So it's an important concept, just to be as agile as possible for us.
And I would add on to that, we're also continually evaluating what's the best learner experience. So, content is one thing, to make sure the right content, but also as people's lives are changing and what is asked of employees, and we are, employees, and we're mothers and daughters and fathers and brothers and so on. There's a lot of demands on our time. And so thinking about what is the learner experiencing, how can we adjust that to meet their needs and serve them better as learners? I mean, we are in service of the learners, right? And so how do we best help them learn? So we're constantly looking at the neuroscience aspects of it. And as we learn more, and neuroscience is becoming more and more advanced, okay, what does that mean? We have a whole series called Brain Hacks, where we teach people how to learn. learn. And so as we embed some of that into our learning design, how can we then do that in technical learning in new ways, right? And so my cloud learning team has pioneered a lot of things, like how do we do, mobile game learning using apps? How do we do things? Micro learning's been around for a while, but how do we do things in even more catchy ways? Like we've been doing TikTok style videos and things, right? So how do we have a little bit of fun? And so dialing up that learner experience, I mean, it follows that our consumer experience is really, really, really fascinating right now, right? Everything's digital. So how does Netflix get your attention? It rolls from one video to another. You don't even know you're on episode 4. Here you are 2 hours later, right? And so how do we use those examples in our personal lives to elevate the learner experience? And that is something why we're also constantly adjusting. So we're constantly like fine tuning a bunch of different dials. There's the content dial, there's the experience dial, then there's like the outcome dial. Are those things kind of adding up? And so that's why it's important for us to constantly be evaluating thinking. And we do a lot of learner listening sessions to hear what they're experiencing. Like we said earlier, working with our SMEs, adjusting constantly. So for us, it's been sort of a key for our success that we're able to adapt pretty quickly. I'll give you a quick example, if you'll indulge me for a minute. When, as COVID's hit different parts of the world differently, recently in the past couple months, you've seen on the news or you've seen in your own companies that India has been really hard hit. And with 50% of our people in India, we actually made the decision to pause some of our things that are happening in India on learning. We just felt like, we know from brain science that when you're stressed, it's really hard to learn. So when you're dealing with life-threatening situations, might not be the best time to run a learning campaign in India. Yeah. So, adjusting like that and saying, well, you know what, that doesn't mean there isn't learning happening. There is learning happening, but are we going to be pushing big things? No, it'll be more just in time things. But then there'll come a time where we have to readjust and focus on what do they need at that point in time. And so that's another example of being fluid in how we're adjusting to what's happening around us.
So I want to thank everyone who's joined us live. Appreciate your questions that you brought in so far. We've answered a lot of them. We will have time for just a few more. So use that Q&A button at the bottom of your window, not the chat button, Q&A button. Before we get there, I guess to take us to the end a little bit, what advice would you have for organizations that want to start doing something similar? Where maybe should they put the most energy first in your experience? Michelle, why don't you go first?
I think, just start small, right? I mean, don't boil the ocean, right? Think about what is going to make a big impact and what is reasonable, right? So, look at the business priorities, right? As we talked a lot about, figure out how can I do one thing, create one program, right? That is truly linked there as a bit of a proof of concept, right? Once you prove that concept to the business, then and get a small success, right? Then the rest will follow. So I think just taking it small, right? One step at a time, and just, proving a small success and then building on that. That would be my advice.
Kind of like what we would do with software and agile development, right? Start
MVP,
small and iterate.
Do an MVP.
Kathy?
I would say we've shifted the way we think about developing learning from just taking what our sponsors and SME want to also thinking about what is our learner perspective, and putting those two things together has helped us really create a well-rounded experience for our people. And so I think in the past, we've really said, oh, this is the sponsor of the program, we're going to listen to what he or she thinks is most important. And now we're rounding it out by saying, let's also talk to the learners. Where are they seeing gaps? What do they need? What do they think is successful? So we've done a lot more kind of design thinking work around personas and thinking about, what do you need as a well-rounded learner in all the different aspects. So putting those together has helped us kind of enlarge our view of what a learner needs.
Awesome, thank you. So we've got a couple questions that I'm going to kind of squish together because they address a similar concept. How do you help folks, particularly in a consultancy, prioritize learning over revenue? Do people allocate hours? Do they have a budget? Like, is there a mechanism you use to help make sure people are taking advantage of these things versus being just completely focused on nose to the grindstone?
That's a challenge, right? That is one of the challenge that's one of those dials that Kathy talked about that we're always fine tuning to figure out how to do it. So there's two expectations, right? One is ongoing learning, continuous learning, right? There's an expectation at Accenture that you are a curious person in your ongoing learning. But we do give also time, right, in the form of, you may charge, X number of hours for this training or that training or this type of training. So we do give that, monetary assessment too, right? So people don't feel, okay, I have to do this, and then I have to do my, my day job 50 hours of the week, and then on top of that, I have to fit in another 10 hours for learning. There are certainly still those feelings, right? So it's a constant working with our leaders to say, hey, make sure that we've given people the time and the space. And again, it comes from leaders, right? Julie, our CEO, has come out with, hey, we need to give people a break, right? Let's give people some space. So she came out with an edict that said, hey, let's try not to have internal meetings on Fridays, right? For the next quarter or two. And like, that is one, what does it mean for Monday through Thursday? That's another story, right? But it's giving people the the permission, if you will, to say, okay, I actually don't have 12 hours of meetings on this day. I can take a breather and I can focus on something else, and it's okay. So for us, it's giving people, yes, the money in the form of how to charge their time to it. It's also the messages from the leaders saying, it's okay that you're focusing on learning, and I want you to focus on learning. So modeling that behavior becomes very important for us too, because if you see your manager, leader, supervisor focusing and taking the time out to work on something and learn something, then you feel like it's okay if you do that too. So it's a tricky balance.
It's interesting you said there's kind of an expectation that folks are curious and just kind of naturally want to learn. And there's a big piece of advice I give to companies, which is, if that's an expectation for you, like if you want people capable of learning, and why wouldn't you, look at your job descriptions and make sure that you're hiring for that. Yep. Like, that's not something you can teach. You can teach skills, but only to someone who wants to learn. You can't teach people to want to learn very easily. So you got to hire for that. So we got one more question here, and I think this is really good. Just give us a sense of scale. So to service an organization as large as Accenture, so 500,000 or so employees, how big is your learning organization?
Oof. Kathy, do you know? I mean,
we have a pretty big learning organization. I don't know the exact numbers. I would guess, because we have a lot of specialties. So we're very fortunate being part of a big company. Like Michelle and I are learning partners. And so we work with the business very closely. We've got people that are instructional designers. We've got people, like I said, who specialize in certifications. We've got people who just run our LMS, that they specialize in that. So we've got a lot of specialty areas within Accenture, and they're all housed in slightly different areas. So I would say in the organization Michelle and I are part of, probably 300 that are along the learning partner line. And then all the instructional designers and the people who run our LMSs, the people support our VILTs, there's probably another, I'm going to guess 500, but don't hold us to those numbers, because interesting question. It is pretty large compared to what I see as I talk to my colleagues in other companies.
Yeah. But Kathy, if it's an investment, then
your head was right where I was thinking, about 1,000 to probably 1,200, 1,500.
Yeah, that's actually, I mean, that's for an organization that size as a percentage. It's not actually ginormous. I mean, it's a lot of people, but you're serving a lot of people as well. So, well, look, we're just about out of time. I really, really appreciate you taking the hour out of your day to walk us through this. It's a super interesting process. I hope that folks can take something away from this and think about how they can start applying at least some of the ideas to their own situation. So again, thanks for joining us. And to all of you who joined us live, thank you also for taking an hour out of your day or evening and hearing what we had to say. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.